Like I mentioned earlier, I tend to look at everything through a lens of practicality, right? Value, fact, vast versus truth, right? And you made a base assumption about me earlier. You tried to verify it, that I'm pro-Palestine. I pull heavy from my espionage background. And one of the key things that was taught to me by the director of CIA, by General Petraeus, was you don't disclose your position. Because if you just, as soon as you disclose your position, you've disclosed your position. I was mentioning that to you earlier about information superiority, right? I've never disclosed my position.
I should have asked you 10% questions.
I will disclose my position for you.
Oh, word.
Right? So impact theory exclusive for anybody who cares. I am actually pro-Israel. I am actually pro-Israel. But the reason I'm pro-Israel is not what I think people will understand. I am pro-Israel because I am very matter-of-factly pro-America. I am pro-United States. The country that I think should remain the dominant superpower in the world is the United States. To aid the United States in that objective, we must ensure the survival of Israel and the Israeli state. Practically speaking, not ideologically, not based on history and justice and everything else, what's happening to the Palestinian people is an atrocity. It's a terrible, sad thing that has forced them into a path of revolutionary terrorism, very similar to what we saw when the United States was rejecting the civil rights movement, when women weren't allowed to vote and they turned to violence. Like, we've seen this before. And it is a sad, tragic thing. What's happened to Palestine, what has happened to Palestine, what is yet to happen to Palestine. All of that being acknowledged, as an American who wants to see American primacy in the future, we have to stand up and support the Israeli state. Having a strategic, economic, and military partner like Israel sit next to our strategic and military partner that is Jordan in the Middle East gives us an incredible economic and military advantage over the entire globe that we cannot sacrifice. Ideology aside, if we want to protect American lives, we have to ensure the long-term longevity, support, and close relationships with the Israeli people and with the country of Israel. That is my official position. What I find is so sad is that there are so few pro-Israel voices that are giving any kind of validation to the Palestinian plight. So I want to be one of those voices that can say, we must partner and support Israel. And the way that we partner and support them is by finding a way for them to protect and defend themselves without turning to this kind of destruction. Because as long as they turn down this path of destruction, they're isolating themselves from everyone else in the world. And that makes it so that we have a very hard time standing next to them as the beacon of freedom in the world. We have a hard time supporting Israel in the face of everybody else, including all the countries of the United Nations and NATO, who look at us and say, how can you stand by and let this happen? How can you support this? How can you fund this? How can you encourage this? Not to mention the corruption challenges that Israel has that so closely align with the corruption challenges of our own past presidential, hopefuls and presidents that we're trying to work through ourselves, between Netanyahu's corruption and Trump's corruption, right? It's a mess, and it's a sad mess. But the bottom line practical element here is that Israel encourages and expands national security objectives for the United States. That doesn't mean we should call Hamas terrorists just because we don't want to call them revolutionary terrorists, which is really more akin to what Malcolm X was, revolutionary terrorism, right? We don't want to go down that road because it's too nuanced for the American people. Instead, we're going to put big billboards up in major cities that say, Hamas is not just Israel's problem, right? Hamas is your problem too. So I say all that because my conclusion is the same as your conclusion. The world, the globe, needs to broker a two-state solution. And in order to incentivize that two-state solution, we need to rally and give the Palestinians that economic boost that the Israelis got post-World War II. Let's find a way to massively expedite their infrastructure, their technology, their their ability to self-govern. Let's give them everything they need. If that means that they want to have close ties with the Arab world, that's exactly what the Arab world has wanted forever. That's why Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the UAE rushed to the aid of the Palestinians. So let's make that happen. And when we negotiate land, let's find a way to make sure that they're neighboring a Arab ally like Jordan or Egypt. Let's find a way to make that happen. Let's make it a world problem instead of saying it's their problem. Because every pair of brothers who has ever had an argument over business, they've needed an arbitrator to help them. They've needed the help of others to come to a meaningful way of resolving their conflict. I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but I am saying like a strong Israel is in America's best interest. A strong, peaceful Middle East is in America's best interest. A strong Muslim world that counterbalances Iran is in America's best interest. So we need to find a way to let people know that this is a more complex issue than what they're hearing, and we're not afraid of the complexity. Let's lean into the complexity and let's solve it together. Because the more that America can influence peace around the world, the more that America is an influential power in the world. And when we don't step into our influence, we leave a vacuum that allows our largest adversaries, Russia, China, Iran, to step into that vacuum instead. And that's exactly what we're seeing in the global world right now. We're seeing not only are those countries stepping into the vacuum that we're leaving behind, but they're allying together. So much so that even Hollywood movies like Leave the World Behind is literally showing what would happen if North Korea and Iran worked together to cut off the United States. That's why there were elements of both languages in the movie itself, right? Spoiler alert. But my point is, if even modern media, if even Hollywood is showing this division from east to west, that goes to show how much it's real, because art reflects reality.
Okay, so one thing I think we have to acknowledge, if we're going to at least put all the pieces on the table, and I just want to reiterate, I don't have the hubris to think I'm the man to turn to solve this problem. Trust me.
I would turn to you. I thought that was a really good solution, man. That was a good solution.
I don't think we have a real one yet because of something you taught me, which is that you really have to get in the mind of your enemy. And every assumption I have, I know is coming from my own frame of reference, which could not be more Western, could not be more American. And they don't want the same things I want. So I'll ask arguably the hardest question of all: how much does the cultural mindset of the Palestinians or the Israelis, is this a cultural collision from just the way that they view how things ought to be, that you're just never going to be able to deal with that? Or is this, well, Iran is throwing so much money around, they're just doing their bidding? Like, what is the point of, like, if I'm Iran and I want to destabilize Israel and get the world to turn on them, what's the lever that I pull to get the Palestinian people to do what I want them to do? Is it a religious lever that I pull? Is it something else?
So in the radicalization process, one of the things that we're taught at CIA is that there's a ladder of radicalization, an actual process for how you radicalize an extremist. And that's an extremist, whether they're a Christian extremist or an ethnic extremist or a Muslim extremist. There's a ladder of extremism. And the first step is validating an injustice. It's the first step, because when people believe that there's a perceived injustice and nobody validates that injustice, then they are conditioned, they are primed to believe that there was no injustice and they're just angry about nothing. So the first step in a radicalization process is to validate an injustice. It's independent of religion, right? This was done to you. It should have never been done to you. And then the next step in the radicalization ladder is to create the aggressor who's guilty of the injustice. This should have never happened to you. It happened to you because of this villain. It's a story. And now your injustice has been validated, and there is a group that executed that injustice on you. The next step in the ladder is to say, there are others like you who have been equally treated in this unjust way by the same group. So now the person who's walking up this ladder is like, I do have a reason to be angry. They are the enemy. And there's this group that I can join against the same enemy. And you can see how this ladder just keeps on going until it ends with you strap a bomb to yourself and you run into their church and you run into their synagogue and you blow yourself up and now you win. You can see how the ladder plays out, right? The way that you defeat extremism is by taking out the first step in the ladder. You have to take away the injustice. Unfortunately, what's happened since October 7th has created generational repercussions. There will not be a Palestinian for the next 3 generations who does not have a visceral memory. A dead brother, a dead sister, a dead child, a dead mother, a dead grandmother, a dead grandfather, aunts, uncles. There have been so many killed in this attack, in this counterattack since October 7th, that it's left a generational scar that is going to be 50 years worth of work for everybody who gets in on the action to try to resolve this problem. We will have to face and accept that there was an injustice that was carried out and that we can resolve it. So that instead of taking people up a ladder of radicalization, we can take them through a ladder of healing, a ladder of resolution, right? What happened here, what is continuing to happen every day, is fixable. We can't fix what's happened already, but we can fix what we do moving forward. We can give people an option. We can give people solutions, give them outcomes. 60 Minutes can change a life if you give them an outcome. So what outcomes can we reach that changes the whole trajectory of what's happening in the Middle East? We have to be willing to ask ourselves that question. And where the rubber really meets the road, where it gets really uncomfortable for us, is that we have to be willing to accept that mistakes were made, policy mistakes, narrative mistakes, military mistakes, and that we are going to pay the reputational and financial penalty of those mistakes that were made. We have to do that if we're going to really invest in a solution to what's happening in the Middle East. Unfortunately, it is just easier when your neighbors are fighting to just stay out of the fight. But if we really want to stand as the leader of the free world, we have to find a way to create freedom for both peoples in the Middle East. We have to be invested in both peoples in the Middle East, not to mention the fact that the closer we get to the Muslim world, the more secure we will be against Islamic extremism, because we won't be isolated. We won't stand opposite Islam and Muslim evolution and Muslim development. We will find a way to partner with it and not be a world divided by boundaries and faith and religion, but a world that's connected by a common belief in humanity and connection. We can do that. It will be expensive. It will be time consuming. It will be a lot of eating crow and humble pie. But if we can do it for 50 years, that doesn't seem like a long time. Consider the fact that Israel didn't even exist before 1948. Mm. In the annals of time, they're less than 100 years old. They're still a young country. We're still a young country, right? If we can evolve and change and come to our adolescence, then certainly they can evolve and change before they even reach their adolescence. Again, maybe that's too ideological, but
I think that it is probably too it's too idealistic. Maybe it's too Pollyanna. So, but it begs the next question, which is okay. And using enemy is not probably ideal language, which again is a step in this whole process of thinking through something well, understanding how you have to change your own frame of reference, which I think is going to be a big part of this. But if I were consulting on this project, I would be really trying to understand, okay, what what is the mindset of the people that I'm dealing with? What are the things that I know I'm not going to be able to alter? So like the religious angle, I'm going to have to find a way for them to see like a connection or to ignore it. I'm not going to be able to get them to adopt each other's way of thinking. Okay, so I still come back to, we have to have a goal. I think the goal has to be that the Palestinians feel they are in control of their own destiny. I just really look, that is a Western notion that not everybody in the world agrees with. So I'm very open to if that's my fundamental flaw in my thinking, but my thinking is built upon that for them to really have hope in their future and to believe that their children's lives will be better, that they have to feel a sense that they own their own destiny, they control their own lives, they can build the nation the way that they want to. And so I need to understand, given that you have to remove the idea of we're just going to get rid of the Jewish people. You are inviting them to fight tooth and nail, and they're currently so much better at that than you that it's just death knell. So I would take that off the table in terms of it's not going to lead to the outcome I'm going for anyway. So if we take that off the table, then I need to understand why the two-state solution continues to be rejected. Because if it's for religious reasons, then we have to either confront that directly and create a new narrative. One thing that I think people underestimate is the need for off-ramps. And this was something I heard people very wisely talk about with Russia and Ukraine. People were very angry with Putin for invading a sovereign nation, and rightly so. But if you don't give him an off-ramp, where he can save face and look good to his people, you are guaranteeing an escalation.
Correct.
And so while it's gross and it's icky and fucking hateful and nobody wants to do it, it's certainly going to save lives. Again, what's your goal? And if your goal is, I'm perfectly happy for every single Ukrainian to die trying to push back Russia, okay, then if that's your goal, then you're making choices that make sense with that. If that isn't your goal, then putting on the table an off-ramp for Putin would be wise.
Freedom! So fresh, so new. Freedom!